scenario thinking for the future and talking about inequities and also in access to the governments. And it's not really like what is the technology is really limiting many of the issues we are facing now. But for the next presentations, I want to now a little bit look more in the further in the technologies and innovation itself, actually, how this is really affecting the future projections of future scenarios, because we're going through the different like hypes, like who thought about AI a few years ago that will be really driving now the innovation and technology. So for that talk, I would like to invite Dr. Usharni Harish Govindarajan. So I hope I pronounce your family name pretty well. He's associate professor at the Information Management and Information System at the University of Shanghai for Science and Technology in China. So for Dr. Harish, I have those again difficult questions, but one is about the role of what role do emerging technologies such as AI, robotics, digital platform play in shaping the future of food, the water, and environment, and how we can really consider these rapidly changing innovation technology in a long-term scenario. So, Dr. Harish, the floor is yours, and I'm really looking forward for your presentation.
Okay, greetings. Thanks again. I hope you can see my screen, Marcin.
Yes, we can see your screen perfectly.
Okay, lovely. Nice to be here and greetings again. It's been a long day for you guys, for us guys, right? So let me just keep it brief. And then, of course, I shared my code for this analysis in Git, and you can have a look at the model that we are using. And of course, if you have some questions about the resources, feel free to send an email to me. We are connected in the email chain, sort of, right? So again, in this broader nexus, right, I have these two simpler questions, which are not simple to begin with, right? But just two questions. Let me give you my perspective to it, and I mean, this perspective is based on the data that we have analyzed in my group, and then probably that would be a good basis for us to discuss further at the end, and of course, engage if required later on. So again, the first part is my research is in the technology management area. So I'm necessarily a technology management guy, not a sustainability guy, but I see sustainability as a component in the overall technology management play. Again, because humans need to survive for technology to evolve and vice versa. So we can't disconnect technological change or growth without the human aspect of things, no matter what popular media may talk about in terms of ChatGPT being able to replace everybody, right? I mean, let's see what the analysis says, right? The first question, okay, to base this analysis, we prepare a comprehensive sort of search strategy. In this search strategy, we sort of extract Web of Science and China's CNKI database because I'm based in China and I can read Chinese. So I have this sort of ability to take over some part and then look at it in detail. And then we also take patent data from global patent grants databases for the last 10 odd years. And then we want to sort of look at these two dimensions. I mean, one dimension representing academic publication, which probably can be said as science in a certain sense, and then the innovation, which is patent grants or IP. So we are trying to look at both these dimensions together to see what's going on. That's broadly to answer this question at first. We have a complex process. We do some natural language processing, followed by some machine learning. And then we use these machine learning results, which are very high vectors, to sort of move it to LLMs and to sort of better understand. So I'll explain the results, but if you go back to the GitHub where I share the model itself, you would see something like this at the code level. Mm, Broadly, right, to answer the questions. Question one, what role do emerging technologies like AI, robotics, and digital platforms play? In terms of academics, our analysis can sort of show us that AI would be that integrating source that sort of does this analysis, prediction, and optimization at a certain layer. And the digital platforms would be that source that interacts with people and systems and infrastructure and so on, right? And then one on the other side, we have robotics that's on the automation of tasks in a certain sense. And we could even like further dig out and see that robotics itself is the sensor of the future in a certain sense, especially in terms of food, right? What we can see is drones are more like sensors collecting information for high accuracy prediction rather than equipments that are going to spray your field and so on and so forth. And I mean, in terms of the volume itself, in terms of publications or in terms of the science or the perspective of science. And then the second question was, how do we consider these rapidly changing scenarios over the long term? Again, we can use these 10 odd years to sort of forecast for a couple of years, let's say 15 to 20 ahead. We can see these three platforms broadly being connected to the physical actions, data platforms, and intelligence. And on the top of all this is your governance layer, right? Which talks about policies, regulations, and standards for equity and so on and so forth, right? So these all sort of feed up to these upstream, higher level application sort of situations in a certain sense, right? Okay, so here's where the results become a little bit interesting, and this is probably our focus in my lab as well, to look at the science and the innovation and sort of look at union and intersection of both of these to see what's happening and what's not happening and where to sort of channelize R&D investments over the next 18 to 24 months, which is one question that we are almost always dealing with in my lab in a certain sense. So again, we use a machine learning model to do that, the one that I briefly showed you earlier. So we do some union analysis. Again, these are two extremely different dimensions with their own dynamics in a certain sense. So we have like years of experience in sort of merging these two dimensions together. It's not very accurate, but it's reasonably fair to sort of say, I mean, in terms of academic purposes, it's reasonably fair to sort of merge these dimensions in terms of our capacity now. When we merge these two dimensions and look at the union of science and innovation in a certain sense, we could overwhelmingly see some proactive requirements in terms of data and ecosystems sort of interacting together, and then the man-machine collaboration, right? Contrary to popular belief, where there is this general opinion that machines would pretty much replace humans at the lower end of the spectrum across these three nexuses, right, we can see very clearly that man-machine systems are much more prevalent in terms of innovation and science itself, rather than the very populist view that probably everything is going to be machine only in a certain sense, right? Um, Again, we can also see some cornerstones, which I will talk about very quickly. Broadly, right, from our union analysis, we can see that again, innovation has its own dynamics in terms of urgency, in terms of timelines, in terms of where they see themselves or position themselves. And again, science has its own timelines and dimensions. Nonetheless, what we can see is as data as a decision maker, the alignment is very common in terms of both the science and the innovation, wherein we can see the sensors and so on and so forth doing some predictive analysis and models that are predicting across the nexus, right? In the union, we could see the need for the integration of ecosystems. Currently, they're pretty much like micro ecosystems of sorts, and then collecting them or connecting them should be some area of work from the union that we probably can see, right? And in terms of automation and autonomy, we can see very strong evidence from innovation that sort of predicts or that sort of tells us that physical farming is going to be harder and harder in the coming time. Again, simply just based on data, not based on other events, right? And then there's a lot of infrastructure that's being built on how to keep the man in the machine in terms of automation and autonomy. And then this is important again because, wherein the general opinion could again be more autonomy and 100% automation across these three scenarios. But our evidence from our analysis sort of suggests pretty much otherwise. There's going to be huge amount of human involvement, at least at the lower end of the work spectrum from the data in a certain sense, right? And then we can talk about the integration in terms of the systemic integration. Academia sort of leans towards this farm to fork sort of model. However, this innovation sort of or the IP sort of leans towards a closed loop automation in a certain sense. So there's like some differences, but again, the union is pretty much there, wherein we are looking at interoperability, scalability, and so on and so forth broadly, right? Okay, I want to sort of quickly wrap up my discussion. Again, of course, welcome you to look at the code and model if that's something that's of interest, right? With this very short sort of discussion on the intersection, right? Where do they differ? Where does science and innovation sort of not meet in a certain sense, right? So here you can see the gap, of course, as we all may rightfully sort of from our experience in working different areas, see it should be somewhere in the regulation space, which is true again, right? However, what we observe across all these layers and these scenarios in terms of technology is this there's this overlooking in terms of things like privacy, data security, and so on and so forth between the innovation and academia. Again, this is not so complex to imagine because, when it comes to innovation, right? Innovation follows something known as the Gall's law, wherein you build components on top of each other, and the components that you don't have, you sort of extend it from other ecosystems, right? Again, when I say extend in terms of innovation, it would mean mergers and acquisitions or sort of licensing in terms of patents and so on and so forth. But nonetheless, right, what we can sort of clearly observe is that there's a gap in terms of ground up imagining in terms of privacy and so on. Again, the intersection analysis also sort of can very clearly show us that the framework, or at least this whole data set, has very little discourse on job displacements, right? While I mean, from the innovation standpoint, we can see the human and machine nexus quite a lot. However, there's on the middle end and the higher end of the job spectrum, right? There's going to be considerable displacement. So what is the role of human in decision making, right? This is a broader question, and again, sociologists have to sort of take over and help us understand this part better. I mean, in a certain sense, right? Um, and when it comes to governance and ethics, there is again, as you may all know, that technology in terms of innovation is much faster than policy as a mechanism. Again, I'm not a policy researcher, but I can clearly see in the intersection space, there's quite a bit of catching up to do. Again, maybe I can give you an example to say what this gap actually represents based on the real world that we live in today, right? Imagine you bought an electric car. Let's say you bought a Tesla 2 years ago or 3 years ago, which is pretty much what I did, right? Imagine you bought this car and they gave you a brochure with a lot of features that you would get when you buy this car. Let's say one of them is called summoning feature, right? Which is you're in the office and you want to leave. You press this button and the car drives up to the gate of the office and just get inside, right? 3 years ago, the hardware, the software, the integration was all ready to go, right? 3 years later, we still can't have this function. You can see that button on the app, but you cannot press it physically. Again, because policy and regulation has not caught up, right? Which means the hardware pretty much is there, the software capacity is there, right? It's just the function is not enabled because, again, policy is still working on, or regulation is still working on catching up, right? And in fact, even if you extrapolate that, right, there is a very high chance that cars bought up to like 5 years ago would never probably be able to use these features in their lifetime, right? So again, this is again not. I mean, from a sustainability point of view, from a technology sustainability point of view, it's not okay. I mean, policy has to catch up, regulation has to catch up quite fast. But nonetheless, right, there's gaps here. Right. And then again, going back to this governance and ethics, we have these parallel planning frameworks for governance and technology, which some of you highlighted very correctly. So probably these areas could be something that would be interesting to look up or look into in the coming time. So broadly, this is a very short summary, and I hope if you have questions, we can engage further. Yeah, so I think giving it back to Marcin for further, yeah,
Thank you, Dr.
discussion.
Harish. Really interesting presentation. So we could learn more about the technology itself and how actually it's very powerful, but on the other hand, there are regulatory gaps and also other different challenges. So, but since we're limited running out of the time, I would like to ask the our final presenter, Dr. Hiroshi Kishino,